We want to share a little bit tonight with you about where we've come from, a little bit of who we are. Those of you who have never heard our story, after we finish, you'll know you've got hope. I actually came from a very good family. I have nothing that I need to try to live down or to try to rise above. I had beautiful parents that have taught me a lot of the things that I value in life today, my spiritual foundation, and the things that I really consider the most important things of my life. And I think probably one of the most precious things about building the Amway business is that I have finally built it big enough that financially I can take care of my folks. And that has been one of the main reasons that I have built it. One of the main reasons when I was out there, besides a few trinkets which I knew would come, some of the things that I struggled for as I was out there working so hard when I was tired was knowing that there's a reason for this. And the reason for it is two precious people that unless I build this big enough to take care of financially, they're not going to be taken care of. And that's the cause inside of me that has driven me to the point we are today. And I never looked at it as driving me as we were building it. It was a pleasure because I knew that the results would be what I was looking for. But anyway, I came from a good family. I moved to Florida when I was in my early 20s, and that's when I met Ed Knickman. Now, I went to work for this corporation called Lanier Business Products. Maybe some of you have heard it. It's a business equipment corporation. And I went into work there as Ed called me whenever he found out that I had come to work there. I went in as a mere secretary. That's what he said that I was. To me, Ed Knickman was not a person that I really cared for. He was cocky, self-assured, and knew where he was going in life, and I resented that very much. And on top of that, he didn't wear hairspray, and he had a rooster tail. And when he walked, it bobbled, and that annoyed me very much. Now, just to tell you a little bit about the working relationship that we had in this office, I was a mere secretary and he was a salesman. I'm one of these people that gets to the bottom line quick in conversation. Ed's one of these people that can talk forever and say in an hour what I say in 5 minutes. This particular evening, I had been working late and he was doing a memo. And some of you ladies who are secretaries, you know what I'm talking about when you plug these things in your ear and with either your knee or your foot, you push a pedal and you start to take information off of a machine and put it on a piece of paper. Most of the salesmen in this office did short memos. So I always took out a short memo form, I put it in a typewriter, and I started typing. Well, this particular night, I had finished with most of the salesman's information, and then Ed Knickman started to talk. So I stuck a piece of short memo in the machine and typed, and he kept going on and on and on and on, and I ran out of the short memo. Well, it was late. I was already in overtime, so rather than starting on a long memo, I just took out a second short memo form, and where it says to and from, I put second page and did it very professionally and laid it on his desk and went home. Now, the next morning when I came in, this was on my desk, and there was one of those little things stuck on the top, you know, those little stickums or floaters, you know, those little things that you stick on something and turn a fan on, it floats off. Well, there was a little note on the top of this memo that says, "This is a long memo." Obviously. Well, I took this same little floater, took it off, took two-way tape, put a piece on the back of the top one, stuck it on top of the second part of it, wrote back on the top of the thing, put it on his desk. You now have a long memo. So Ed and I went around and around and around. I mean, it was very volatile in this office. So then he got transferred. He actually got transferred into sales management and got transferred all over the country, and I stayed with this particular office. And I became what was called an office manager. I moved up from being a mere secretary. Every once in a while, I'd see one of Ed's long memos float across someone's desk. I never really cared to read it because I could care less what he was doing with his life. The less I saw him, the better I liked it. One day I was sitting in my office, and a bouquet of roses came around the door jamb. And I thought, now what salesman has done what now that they want forgiveness for? It was quite typical in an office of this size. I had 20-some-odd salesmen that I worked with. They preferred that I would say work with rather than they work for. So anyway, the next thing that stuck its head around the door, guess what? You're right, the rooster tail without hairspray. Many years had passed, he still didn't use hairspray. Well, all of a sudden I felt like myself was going to break out in hives, and I said to him, I said, "What are you doing in this office?" He said, "Well, I've come back here to take off the office as district manager." Now, you got to understand, a district manager was my boss. Well, I tried to keep my composure, and I said, that's very nice. I'm glad to have you here. Lie, lie, lie. Well, we got even worse. It got so volatile in the office that the district manager, or the big honcho, flew down from Atlanta, called us in behind closed doors and said, look, if you two can't learn to get along and work together, one of you has to go. Because the talk is all over the corporation about all the noise that's going on down here. I said, that's simple. He doesn't know what he's doing, fire him. Truth, that's exactly what I said. But I realized that that was probably not going to happen, that Ed was my boss, and they were not going to fire him and keep me, and I needed this job, so I decided, well, I'll live with this guy the best I can, work out a situation where I can deal with it, and I'll put out resumes for other places to find another job. But unfortunately, I had worked myself in a position financially in this particular position that it was hard to replace my income. So I had to learn to live with this. Well, we got along. I did have to admit the guy did have some brains. You know, if he stopped his mouth long enough, you could get to that point. And he was quite intelligent in what we were doing in the office, so I learned to work with him, and we did some real nice things as far as working out business and stuff like that. And it was quite nice to realize that there was a guy that we thought a lot alike in business, and he was a goal setter, and I respected that. So as I started giving him some room, I realized that this man was a man that I really admired. So one day when he was taking me, he was going out of town, he asked me to take him to the airport, so I said, okay, and I drove him to the airport. And just as he got ready to go through that little thing, you know, where it x-rays all your stuff as you go through, he leaned down and kissed me on the cheek. And all of a sudden, I had the strangest feeling that went over me, and I said, this can't be happening to me. I have got it all together. I'm cool, calm, and collected, and I don't like this man. And all the way back to the office, I kept saying, I don't like this man. In fact, I despise this man. I don't like this man. But somehow this strange little feeling that was going over me did not agree with what I was saying. And I thought, what am I going to do about this? So anyways, time passed, Ed and I started seeing each other, and I'll share this with you. This is cute. I had a son, he's about maybe 10 or 11 at this time, and he was brought up in the South. And in the South, you try to teach, you know, your children all the Southern manners and all that kind of stuff. And he had trouble with last names. You know, sometimes they were difficult to pronounce. And so what I taught him as he was growing up, it was quite all right and gracious to, if he couldn't pronounce the last name, that he could use the first name. As long as, if it was a man or a woman, if it was a woman, he put Mrs. in front of it. If it was a man, he put Mr. in front of it. So I told my son one day, I said, Jamie, I said, Ed Knickman is coming for dinner tonight. And I said, you know, try to be on your best behavior. So he says, okay, yes, ma'am. So he went back to his room, and a little bit he came out, and he says, Mom, I need to ask you something. I said, what? He says, do I call him Mr. Ed? I said, yeah, go ahead, it fits. Well, obviously, Ed and I worked things out. I mean, Ed and I will be married 15 years in November, and it probably has been one of the most precious relationships that I have ever been anywhere around, close to, or involved in. We got all the door slamming out of the way before we got married, so there's no need anymore to fight. We got it all out of the way. But that doesn't say we haven't had a few tiffs, because we have. But Ed Knickman and I, we just have a phenomenal relationship, and that's one of the reasons we built this business, just to be together. And, I mean, we have fun. It's just wonderful. It really is. It doesn't mean I don't have bad days with Ed Knickman. I do. But he is my special friend, and I do love him very much. We got started in the Amway business a few years ago. Brighart showed us the plan. That was obviously an experience. I've come to know and love Brighart, but the first time I ever saw him, I did not think he was a businessman. It was just one of those things where I thought he was either smoking or doing something, snorting or doing something strange. Because it was just weird, and it was in Miami, and, you know, all the things he did on the board was not exactly what I thought was the business. But anyway, we got involved in the Amway business, moved along pretty fast as we went direct, I think, about 5 months after Ed started listening, which took about 3 months for him to close his mouth and start listening. And, you know, I knew it would work. I tell people this all the time. It would work because the business is so simple. And I knew that we could do it because it only takes two things. And I share this all the time after open opportunity meetings. Ed likes to talk, and I like to buy things. It's just as simple as that. And I knew it would work. I knew we could make it work. So we moved along with the business. We went through some real trials in building the business physically. Some of y'all know that I went through back surgery almost 5 years ago. I was off my feet for 6 months. It was a very tough time for us in this business because we were at a certain level. We were trying to move on, and that was a period of my life when I could not be out there in the business. My whole mind was to getting well. I mean, I hurt so bad, I just lived with pain 24 hours a day. It never seemed to go away. And I just took ibuprofen by the handsful because they wouldn't give me anything any stronger because they're afraid if they did, I'd do something and really mess myself up. But we put off surgery for so long. We prayed for a miraculous healing. It didn't come. We went through some real struggles trying to figure out why. And there's just so many times when you walk on faith in life and you deal with things in life that you don't understand. But God does reward the faithful. I mean, I have come to understand that God is far more concerned with my obedience to his godly principles than succeeding in making a lot of money. And sometimes one of the godly principles that he is looking for in us is just to walk on faith, to accept by faith that he has a plan and that we're fitting into that. So as we went through this period of time in building the business, it was a real struggle for us. We finally went into, and I decided to have surgery, and I prayed a lot about, and I remember, and this is the part of this business that's so precious to me. As I went into surgery, there were so many people from our organization there in the hospital. They had to ask them to leave the waiting room because there was just no room for other people to come in. And I was scared to death. I'd go through periods of time when I know it was the right thing to do. I knew that this is what God said is going to be good. It's going to be taken care of. I remember when I talked to my surgeon, who was a delightful person, I came to really trust him. But he told me, he says, because of malpractice insurance, he said, I can't really anymore tell you everything's going to be all right, that you're going to come through this just fine, and all these kind of things. I have to tell you exactly what I see. And I said, what do you see? He said, you put this surgery off so long, he said, you probably will not come through this without a definite limp. You will probably always walk with a limp. And I said, well, what kind of a surgery do you really consider this? How do you classify this? He said, I classify 2 surgeries that are this serious, back and brain. I said, not heart? He said, it's interesting. He said, no, if something goes wrong with heart, he said, that's it, you're in heaven. He said, if something goes wrong with one of these 2, he said, you'd be in a wheelchair the rest of your life. That's what I went into surgery with. That's what I faced. But the day they rolled me down that aisle into that room before you go into surgery, our people lined that whole hall. And as I went down on that thing, Ed holding my hand, walking beside me, these people in our organization had their fingers up and said, you're going to come through there just fine. We're praying for you, man. You're going to make it. You're going to come out of there and you're going to run a mile. These were our people from the Amway business. Not from my church, not from my family, because they couldn't be there. They had jobs and couldn't come. But these were our people from the Amway business. The surgery was 6.5 hours. When they rolled me back out of that waiting room, out of the recovery room, the same people and more were still lined up against that hall. They had waited for 6.5 hours. And when I came out, they said, we told you, why don't you just get up off that thing and walk? You can do it, you can do it. But it was just so special to have that kind of support. There were so many flowers that came into the hospital that they had to send them up and down the halls to the other rooms because there was no room in my hospital room. And I'll share this with you. This is kind of special. One morning, I'm one of these people that needs coffee in the morning. It's just a very important part of my life. In fact, it's very important for most people that are around me in the morning. And the nurses learned this real quick. And in the morning, they bring my coffee before breakfast was delivered. And one morning, I woke up early, and I heard them talking outside my room, and they said, who is she? And the other one says, I don't know. Someone said, well, do you think she's famous? And they said, well, I don't know. One of them said, well, ask her. No, you ask her. If she's famous, it may seem foolish. So they came in the room, and one of them said to me, have we seen you on the TV? And I said, no. They said, well, who are you? I mean, I thought maybe I saw you on a soap opera. And I said, well, no, you haven't seen me on a soap opera, but I do have a lot to do with soap. But one of them looked at me and she said, "You're not famous." And I said, "No, I'm not famous. I'm just loved." And I'll never forget the look on that woman's face as her bottom lip quivered, and she said, "God, it must be nice." People, there are people out there waiting for your touch. And if you'll touch enough lives, and if you'll overcome the fears that you face and the rejection that'll come to you, because it's minor. I can't remember the people today that told us no. I can't remember even the faces of the people that laughed at us, because my dream was bigger than that rejection. And when you learn to overcome that, and you get out there and you touch the lives of the people that need so bad to be touched, there'll be more money than you'll know what to do with. Because it's very, very important that you love first. Well, anyway, I got out of that just fine. 10 days after surgery, I walked a 19-minute mile. As you can tell today, I don't walk with a limp. Praise God for the glory that He's put in my life. I lost a brother 4 years ago. He was badly burned in a car accident, and the Lord took him home after 6 weeks. That was a tough time in my life. So I know what it is to deal with tragedy. But I want you to understand, people, there is a difference, and you need to separate out in your mind the difference between discouragement and tragedy. Getting discouraged in this business is something you're going to face day in and day out. Don't treat it like it's a tragedy. Look at it, so what, who gives a rip, and let's move on. Because if you get hung up on this discouragement, you'll never get to where you want to be in this business. Discouragement is not tragedies. Learn to deal with the tragedies. They're going to come. Life offers them to you, and just move on. Know that there's people that love you and who are willing to support you build this business. There's been some things I've learned in building this business. I've learned that you'll never succeed in this without humility. Humility is probably one of the least possessed things in the human life. We need to learn to be humble. We need to learn to take the back step, as that song says. The face without the smile without a face, or whatever it says, that there was a person who is a strength in your life that takes the back seat. As Jesus said in the parable, go to the back room. If you're invited to a wedding feast, don't sit in the front seat. Go to the back room so that you won't be, go to the back seat so that you won't be embarrassed when somebody asks you to move. And then when the time is right and the master invites you to the front, you can be glorified and lifted up. Always take the back seat and let someone else take the glory. Because if you'll do that, the glory will come to you. But I have learned, it's been tough for me to learn humility. I'm not a person that submits easily. I mean, Ed can tell you that. But learn to say half what you think. What a challenge that has been for me. Learn to zip the lip. Learn to ask yourself this question as you're building this business. What I say, will it heal? Or will it tear down? If it will not heal in the situation you're involved in, keep it to yourself. Because let me tell you, it takes a lot longer for you to get straightened out inside yourself than what you'll tear down if you spread out the word. You need to say to yourself, will it heal? I have learned, this has been tough too, I have learned never to complain about what Ed Knickman is not doing unless I'm willing to do it myself. That's been a hard one for me. But I know that this man, if I can lift him up, and if I can encourage him, if I can build him up, then I know what I need in life and what I want in life I'll have. But he's a very special man, and I want to bring him up here because we're running out of time. But I just want y'all to know that I do care for you. I love you. Learn to find solutions and stop making excuses. Commitment finds solutions. Weaknesses make excuses. But I'm going to bring Ed up now. This is the man that I tell you what, I have learned that it is easy to handle the word submission. When I went into scriptures and did a study on it and realized what it really means, it means to stand beneath someone and to lift them up, to encourage them, and to believe in what they're doing. And this man who stands here on my right, it's been easy to submit to because, see, he submits to God every day. And I feel protected under that umbrella. And I want you to listen to this guy because he's got a wealth of information. I love you.
I'm telling you what can I tell you about building this business? What can I tell you that'll get you from way back over here in that back row up onto this stage, or from way back over here back into the VIP room, or from somewhere over here back to this backstage area? What do I need to tell you? What do I need to share with you? I sat over here a little bit earlier this afternoon as we were listening to Joyce Meyer speak, and I looked out into the faces of the crowd out here, and I saw some of you, and I can just look into your faces. I can almost look in your eyes and see what's there. I can see some of you are still kind of like that glazed look that either says you didn't get enough sleep, or I'm not sure I believe this, or what am I doing here, or whatever. A few of you, but most of you, I see that sparkle of hope that's in there. And I know that when Rose and I came to this business, we came with just that hope. We came with a lot of fears. We came with a lot of doubts. We came with a lot of skepticism. We came with all the baggage that we had built up, or I had built up over 43 years of living, and 15 years of working for a corporation for whom I was simply a number. And as the chairman of the board said in a management meeting that I sat in one day, and words that I've never forgotten, and there was a group of managers sitting around a table, 20 or 30 men, I guess, all of which had similar responsibilities to what I did, all of which were charged with performance and quotas and profits and bottom line figures and all this sort of stuff. And this was kind of the annual review time, and everybody was being evaluated in front of their peers. And this one particular fellow that I knew was a friend of mine was working in an office in Texas, and he had been sent out there, and it was an office that was really struggling, and he had been sent kind of like the sacrificial lamb and said, here's your great opportunity, right? Go clean this up. And he'd gone out there and he'd spent about 2 years, and I knew because he used to talk to me how much he had struggled and what a sacrifice he had made of his life to try to get this particular office going and to try to bring a profit in. And he had not been successful. And we sat in this meeting that day, and I listened as this chairman of the board, when it came to this gentleman's turn, this friend of mine's turn, this chairman of the board looked at this guy, and he was sitting down across this long conference table. And the chairman of the board stood up, and he just kind of put his knuckles down on the desk and leaned across the table and glared at this guy and proceeded to verbally destroy this man in front of all of us. He called him every name that you could imagine, accused him of all kinds of things, shook his fist at him, and finally took his finger. Boy, I don't know how you are, but don't you hate it when somebody gives you one of these? This guy leaned across this table and down and across. The guy was about 10 or 12 feet down the table from me. He stuck his finger out at his face, and he says, let me tell you one thing, and you better get this straight. He said, in this company, people are doers of things, and if they can't get it done, you fire them and get somebody else that will. And boy, those words cut to my heart. And I sat there, and I was almost in tears for this guy. And I realized how true that is in most places. Now, fortunately, many people don't work in a company where they have a boss or a chairman of the board or a president or somebody who is perhaps that profane and that, whatever you want to call it, repulsive. But I think in one way or another, most times when you work for a company the way I did, you do come to that realization that you are a number, that you are a doer of a task. And if it's not you, it'll be somebody else. And I love it when I go out and I show this plan to people, and you can almost look in their face, and they have this, well, you don't understand, Ed. I have a very important position. And some of them will even be so bold as to say, well, I am really the only one in my company that can do what I do. Like this, I am this indispensable person. And I love to use this example, and sometimes if I can do it, if I find somebody like that, I said, let me tell you something. Anytime that you work for a company and you think that you are so all-important and so indispensable, I said, if you want to see a graphic illustration of that, stick your finger in a glass of water and pull it out and watch how long the hole lasts. Because that's just about how long it would take any company to find someone else to do what you or I did. I don't care what you think, you can be replaced, just like that. But you know what? You get busy and build this business, there is nobody like you. Nobody has your gift. Nobody has your dream. Nobody has your special brand of magic. Only you are going to be able to put that magic that you possess into the lives of first a few, and then a few more, and then hundreds, and then thousands, and only you possess that magic. And I want you to remember that. I don't care if you're just getting started. You're sitting back over here, and I don't know what it is. The new people always sit in the back row or close to it. How do I know that? Because that's where I sat the first time I went to a function like this. It wasn't a family reunion. It was a dream weekend. It was in Atlanta, Georgia. We'd been in the business 3 months. Got it at the end of September, October, November, 3 months. Hadn't done much. Well, I mean, not that really counted. We had sold 5 kits. The best month in volume we had was the month we bought those 5 kits. Out of those 5 kits, we hadn't learned the trick about you take the box with you, so we let them keep the boxes. Didn't understand that when we left. In fact, I think on several of them, I may have even done it with all of them. I'm kind of a orderly type of person, so I very carefully put all the things right back into the box, put the paperwork on it, made it real easy for them to slide under the stairs when I left. And so out of those first 5 people that we sponsored in this business, 3 of them, I don't think, ever even placed an order. Nothing. Never went to a meeting, never listened to a tape, never sold a product, never did anything with the business. The other 2, one was a neighbor up the street. A sharp young guy, worked at digital equipment, was a salesman like I was. We really related real well. His wife was a librarian in a junior high school, had a little son. Neat people. We really enjoyed them. The kind of people that you really wish would build this business because you could enjoy being with them already. It would be fun to go on trips with them and go on the yachts with them and go to Hawaii with them. And we really wanted, we didn't know all those things were out there, but we just thought these would be kind of neat people to have with us. Well, in spite of his posture as a salesman, he somehow never quite got beyond his fears in this business, and the only person we succeeded in helping him to sponsor was his mother, who was in her late 60s. And for a few weeks, she ordered a few products, and that meant that they were ordering a few products, and then rather unexpectedly, his mother passed away. Obviously, she quit. The next week, we didn't get an order. And at the end of the year, came December, something strange happened. We never have quite figured this out. We've never had anybody really call up and say, I quit. But somehow, miraculous, they just seem to kind of go and vaporize right under your eyes. We don't know where they go. They just sort of vanish. And I mean, these were people right up the street from us, and they just sort of vaporized. Well, that was one of the 2 of the 5 that had done anything. The other was a young single girl named Siggy, and she worked with me, tall, blonde, Icelandic girl, beautiful girl, long blonde hair down to here, legs all the way up to here, and she came to our first home meeting, and it was in the late part of September, and it was pretty hot in Miami at that time, and I had made all of the phone calls to invite people to our first meeting after I got home from work at 6:30 on the night that Steve Woods was to do our meeting an hour and a half later. That's when I made my phone calls. I didn't really have a list. I just started to think, who did I know? And I was kind of shooting from the hip. And the last one that I called was Siggy. And I said, Siggy, listen, I got some folks coming over to the house tonight. Why don't you come on over? And so, being the type of a girl that she was, she said, sure, I'd love to. Well, everybody else came, and if you could have seen, I'd have given anything for a videotape of that first home meeting. How many of you would like to videotape some of your early meetings? Wouldn't they be hilarious? You know, bloopers, right? And so it was a hot day. We were trying, it wasn't that we were broke or that we weren't doing real well, but we kind of said that we liked the natural breezes, so why run the air conditioning? So here it was in our little townhouse in Miami. It must have been 89 or 90 or 109 or whatever. It was a hot summer, late summer afternoon in Miami, and we had the doors open, figured that allowed enough air in, and people, one couple had come, they'd been playing tennis, and they smelled like it, and another couple of people came in various states of dress or undress or whatever, and so sure enough, at 8:05, the doorbell rings, and here's our upline direct, Steve and Annette Woods, and Steve's got his gray pants, his blue blazer, his white shirt, and his red tie. I swore he slept in that stuff because it's the only outfit I saw for about 3 years in this business. And here's his pretty little blonde wife, Annette, and they're standing there. They've got this little brown bag or box or whatever it is full of products, and he's got his marker board and his easel, and he's got all this stuff, and I really didn't even know him. So he comes into my living room, and he gets this all set up, and everybody's kind of sitting there. I didn't know anything about introducing him. You know, I said, well, this is this guy, Steve is his name, and he's got some stuff he's going to tell you. I mean, classic introduction. And Steve is there, and he's already got his coat off because, you know, we talk about kind of dressing down to the level of the people or close. Well, you couldn't have dressed down much more than some of these people. But anyhow, Steve was out of his coat and had his tie loosened up and his shirt sleeves rolled up, and he was just kind of getting started in the plan, and all of a sudden you hear ding dong. So I figured, well, what more, get up, walk over to the front door, and open the front door, and here's Siggy. All 5'10", blonde hair, blue eyes, long legs, with a pair of hot pink short shorts, a halter top and a bottle of wine in her hand, and she had come for the party. Well, poor Steve, she walked in, and I mean, you know, when you got legs that were as long as that, and she sits down, our couch was one of those that you kind of sit down in instead of on, so you kind of get the picture of what this would look like. And here was poor Steve. He was trying to talk about the 6'4", and all he kept saying were these legs, you know. And I don't know, I don't remember. I thought it was kind of cute, but he wasn't too amused. But anyhow, a month or so later, when it was time to go to Atlanta, Steve said, well, listen, you need to go. We're having this thing called a function. It's up in Atlanta, and we lived in Miami. That was 600 miles away. He said, it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and he said, you need to be there. And I said, well, I'm afraid I won't be able to make that, Steve. He said, well, why not? I said, well, I have to work right. I have a job. I said, you know, maybe some of these people are wealthy, but I said, I've got a job. I got a boss that likes to see my face every morning at 8 o'clock, and I have to be at work. He said, I never remember this. I've never forgotten it. And he looked at me. He didn't respond right away, but he looked at me, and he said, Ed, I've got a lot of confidence in you. I know you'll work it out. And he turned around and walked away from me. Have you ever tried that with someone? How many of you tried to bring somebody here that didn't come? How many of you tried to bring somebody here that didn't come? I mean, you did everything you knew, right, short of buying them the ticket, right? The next time somebody is, you have to kind of know in your heart, these are people that need to be there. These are people that could be there if they really wanted to, but they give you this kind of excuse talk. Well, I don't know, the babysitter, the wife, the mother, the job, the kids. Just try, look them right in the eye, get up real close in their face, a little bit of a smile, not a lot of smile, just a little bit of smile. Just kind of smile and say, I got a lot of confidence in David. I know you can work this out. And just turn around and walk away from them and leave it in their hands. And Steve did that. Well, I think that I responded more to that than if he'd have said, well, if you don't dare go there, you're a loser. If you don't go there, da, 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 da. He just says, I got a lot of confidence. And I learned a principle that night that I've always remembered. It's amazing what can happen if you just build people up and give them the reputation that you would like them to earn, that you'd like them to have. And Steve did that with me. So I didn't know how to do that, but I just said to Siggy, I said, hey, Siggy, you want to go to Atlanta with Rose and me for the weekend? Oh, yeah, let's go to Atlanta. So I had to work. There was no joke about that. So sure enough, Friday morning, I got up and got dressed and went to the office. Got there at 5 minutes of 8 like I always did, and walked in the door, and there's my boss smiling. Good morning, Ed. Good morning, how are you? And went back and pedaled around the office, and at about 5 minutes of 9, I said to my boss, I said, listen, I got some things I've got to do outside today. I said, I may get back in late this afternoon or I may not, but I said, in any event, I'll be checking in through the day just to make sure if there's anything, just leave it with the secretary. I'll be sure and pick up my messages. Well, I walked out that door, and around the corner behind the building sat Rose and Siggy in our car. Suitcases packed, tank full of gas, big thermos of coffee. At 9:01, we were Atlanta bound. All right. We got into Atlanta 12 hours later, actually a little more than 12 hours. It was a little after 10 o'clock, walked into the hotel, and it was kind of like when we came in here last night. Rose and I didn't get in last night till a little after 11, and we walked in. The hotel was almost deserted. There was a girl on the desk. There was one or two people out front. A few of your kids were out, laying in the street or doing something. No, they weren't. Just joking. But it was real quiet. Anybody that walked into this hotel at 11 o'clock last night would have probably just thought, gee, this place is kind of deserted. And that's what we looked around. We saw a couple of people. We didn't see anything. I said, well, I guess we'll just, we'll go ahead and get a night's sleep. We'd gotten up early, driven all day. We were kind of tired. So we got checked in. Siggy went to her room. Rose and I went to our room. And I think, as I remember, we turned on the television, watched the last part of a movie, and fell asleep about 11:30, 12 o'clock. Just imagine that even a guy like Ed Knickman, who slept through or watched TV or whatever I was doing, even guys like Ed Knickman can go diamond. So maybe there's hope for me, right? And maybe there's hope for the people that didn't come at all this weekend, if you can just get them here the next time, or if you can just get them to listen to a tape, or get out and have a meeting, or show the plan, or whatever. The neat thing about this business, there's hope for all of us. There's hope for everybody. I guess that's the neat thing about this business. We're in the hope business. Rose said that lady in the hospital asked her if she had anything to do with soap. No, but she has a lot to do with hope. And I guess that's the exciting thing for us, that when we come tonight and we come here this weekend and we share our time and a little bit of our information with you that we might have learned over the weekend, that maybe more than anything, more than the information, more than the fancy clothes and the great music and the great entertainment and all this, maybe more than anything, when you leave here tomorrow and you head back up the highway towards your home, you're going to think about the hope that you're taking home with you, because that's the hope that's going to cause you to build a big organization. That's the hope that might take you over some of the fears. Rose talked about two things, and there was actually one other one that I had on my mind this afternoon. A lot, we do this all the time. We don't compare notes. We don't talk about what we're going to talk about. But she was talking, the two words that kept coming out of what I heard her say today as I listened to her tonight was the words fear and faith. And I think there's three things three words, fear, faith, and focus, that have been so critical to us in this business. Was fear critical? Not in the sense that fear caused us to build this business, although from the day I sat in that meeting and watched the chairman of that board berate this man in front of all of us, of his peers, there was a fear that nagged at me every day, is that when would it be my turn to be in that seat? Whether I was there or not, what day was I going to get called in and somebody was going to shake their finger in my face and say, Knickman, you're just not cutting it. That fear lingered in my mind, and I guess as I saw this business come along, I thought for the first time in my working life, which had been really since I was 13 years old, I saw a possibility that maybe I could insulate myself from ever being in that situation. What was interesting is that same man, 4 years later, or three years later, that man who had become the chairman of the board was in Atlanta, and on one particular afternoon, one morning, actually, we had called in. We had a Monday morning sales meeting. It was one of my exciting highlights of my week. Every Monday morning at 7:30, we had to be in the office because that was pep rally time. And, that was really exciting. Any of you that have ever been to those things. And so there was one particular salesman in my office. There was a little short guy named Steve, and he was real mouthy. And I don't know how it was, because I had made a decision early on in this business that I was not going to mix this business and my job. I don't know whether it was a matter of principle, integrity, fear. I don't know what it was. I just decided that I was not going to take this business into my office. First of all, I didn't intend to ever sponsor anybody that I worked with, because I saw about as much of those people as I cared to, and enough that I knew that I didn't want to spend any more time with them than I had to. So I didn't do that. But somehow or other, this little guy named Steve had gotten the word that I was in Amway. And so from the time he found out, I don't know whether it was, don't have any idea, so, regularly, this was my little, how's your Amway doing, It's like I had a growth on my side or something, And, of course, early on, this is kind of hard to take. I know some of you, most of you have probably been through that. I hope all of you've got somebody that gives you the little Amway thing to you, because you need somebody like that. I never had an O'Harry. Well, I could have come close to a few of them, I guess. But this was my little needle. This is the little thorn in my side, the burr in my saddle, and periodically, every couple of weeks, I'd have to go into this meeting, and here would be Steve, and how's your little Amway doing again? And I just kind of bit my lip and just turned around and went out of the office, because, you see, inside, I knew what I had. I knew where I was going, and there wasn't anybody who was going to shake my tree, not especially this little guy. I'm not sure, but as I recall, I think it might have been one of the months that we hit Ruby volume, and I don't know what the total number was. I can't remember at this time, but all I remember is that it was across the street from our office, there was a branch of the bank where we had our business account. And on that particular weekend, or Monday morning, Rose had given me a deposit slip with a bunch of checks attached to it to drop off in the bank, and I remembered walking into the office, and here's little Stevie with his hands, your little Amway, and this was going, and he didn't let up. It wasn't just once. It was like, one of these mornings he was in rare form. It was like several times, and it was not just standing in right beside me. It got to the point where it was coming from across the office, and I worked in kind of a bullpen environment. There were like about a dozen salesmen that all had desks out in the middle of this big room, and this got to the point where it was coming across the room. Ed, how's your Amway doing? And I finally had just had it as up to here with this guy, so I got up from my desk, pushed my chair back, walked across to where he was sitting at his desk. I said, Steve, you've been asking me about how my Amway business is doing long enough. I thought I'd just show you. And I reached out, and I stuck that check right in his face like this. And he kind of went back like this and looked at it, and you could see that I had scored a point, right? Any of you ever score a point? Oh, yeah. And So it took him a couple of seconds. He was a pretty quick-minded person. Took him a couple of seconds. He says, "What was that, for last year?" I said, "No, Steve, that was last month." And the look on his face would have stopped a truck. I'm telling you, the color went out of his face, his jaw dropped down to his chest, and I said, and I stuck that check back in my pocket, walked back to my desk, closed up my briefcase, and walked out the door. Well, it didn't take probably more than 5 minutes for the buzz to go around that office. I'm out. I leave. About 10 o'clock, I call in, check in from a message. The secretary said, Jim wants to speak to you. That was my district manager. He says, "Jim wants to speak to you." I got on the phone. He said, "Ed," he said, "this is Jim." He said, "Listen," he said, "when you get finished this afternoon," he said, "I need you to come into the office. He said, we have to have a talk." I'm ready. I couldn't wait for 5 o'clock to come. This is on, I think, the 2nd of July. Rose and I had planned to take the weekend of the 4th and go up to North Georgia for one of our twice-a-year 3-day vacations. And we were going to drive up on Friday, leave Thursday night, actually drive up and spend Friday, Saturday, Sunday up in the North Georgia mountains. And so I go in at 5 o'clock, and it was one of these sit down and close the door, one of those kind of sessions, you know. Oh, I love it. And so he said, "Listen, Ed," he said, I really am concerned about something." He says, "I know that you've got some kind of little business going on the side here." And he said, "It's come to my attention recently, right, this morning, that there really may be some conflict of interest in what you're doing with your job." And he says, "I've talked to the president of the company up in Atlanta, and he would like to see you in his office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, that's really great. I assume since this is 5 that you expect me to fly up, right?" And he said, "Well, I'm sure." And I said, "Well, that's just terrific." I said, "You don't mind if Rose goes along with me, because other than that, I was going to have to drive, right?" So I said, "Great." I said, "We'll be there." Well, then he called the next morning, or that night, he called me home. He said, "Listen, he can't make it at 9. He said, "It's not going to be until 5 o'clock tomorrow evening." I said, "No problem. We'll find something to do." So we hopped on a plane, flew up there, picked up a rental car, drove out to the corporate offices, pulled in the parking lot about 5 o'clock, just as the herd was mooing its way out of the parking lot, you know. And got out of the car, and my adrenaline was so pumped, because we had gotten to the point in this business at that time where we had paid off all of our debts. We were out of debt. We had put about a year's worth of living expenses in the bank. We had an organization that was growing. We were excited about it, and I was just kind of biding my time. And I mean, when this opportunity came along, I can't describe in words what was going through me at that time, but I was so wired, it was unbelievable. I get out of the car. Rose is going to wait. She said, "You want me to go in?" She said, "No, I'll sit here." So I get out of the car, and I'm about to go in the door of the office, and this Jeep Cherokee is pulling down through the parking lot and out. And all of a sudden, the window goes down, and this man, who is this chairman of the board fella, bellers out across the parking lot. He said,
"Knickman, if you weren't spending so much of your time with that blankety-blank Amway thing, you wouldn't have to be here."
I said, "Good night, Gene." And I waved as he drove out of the parking lot. Went up into an office, and for the next 3 hours had a tribunal with the president of the company, a regional vice president, a regional manager, and me. And oh, if I could have videoed that meeting, I'd have loved it too, because let me tell you, I laid it on. I listened to him for about 10 minutes, and finally I said, "Look, let me tell you something right now." I said, "I have given you, at this point, almost 18 years of my life." I said, "I get in earlier, I stay later, I work harder, and I produce more than 95% of the salesmen that you have. And I said, if you ever have reason to question my integrity or my loyalty to this company," I said, "you got to take a second look." And I said, "But furthermore, let me tell," I was wired. I said, "Let me tell you this," and here's the president of the company, all these big hotshots, here's a little salesman, right? I said, "Let me tell you this." I said, "As far as I'm concerned," I said, "this meeting today is a total waste of your time, my money, my time, and the company's money." I said, what I do during the day from 7 in the morning until 7 at night may be yours. But, honey, what I do after 7 o'clock at night is my business, and if you got a problem with that, we're going to deal with it right now." You talk about something that'll make you feel tall. They could have pulled me off the ceiling that day. Like Don Wilson said one time, when was the day that posture fell? For me, it was that day, because that's the day that I stepped over the line. I quit being a full-time Lanier person and a part-time Amway distributor, and I started becoming a full-time Amway distributor and a part-time salesman. And that was the day that our business really took a giant step forward. Where did it happen? Right here. Did our PV change that month? No. Did we break any directs that month? No. But in here and in here, I knew that I had just closed the escape hatch. I had just burned the bridge, and I knew there was one path for me, and that was the path to success as a Diamond Direct in the Amway business. Now, I don't know whether you've done that yet. Some of you are still sitting here being part-time Amway and full-time something else. I still continued, by the way, let me point out, for another year and a half, I continued to work 60 to 70 hours a week for that company. I still was in there as early as anybody else. I still worked late. I still produced more business. I wanted to be sure that when I left there was a great big hole that it was going to take them years to fill. So I don't know what you're doing, and maybe you've got one of those jobs or those positions that you want to have for a long, long time. You want to do it because you just love it. You want to do it even though you don't take a paycheck for it. You enjoy your job so much. You just love your boss. You probably have his picture on your mantle every night before you go. You go, I love you, boss. Right. Not right. But whatever it is, here's the only thing I want to say to you. Whatever you do, see, I had no vendetta. I really didn't. The job that I had was very good to me for 19 years, 6 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. You should continue to work 60 and 70 hours a week or more for the same amount of money that you can earn in this business when you're putting in 8, 10, 12 hours a week. It just don't make sense to keep doing that unless you got nothing better to do with your time. But I challenge every one of you to this cause, I guess, or to this challenge. Whatever you're doing now, in this business, in your family, in your church, in your finances, in your job, whatever you're doing, my challenge to you is do it the best that you can possibly do. Make a big hole. Leave a big hole. When you leave, let people talk about you in your job or your profession or your office for years to come, how they could never understand how you could ever leave such a great position with all the money that you were making and all the good that you were doing. Because you see, Amway is not just something Rose and I do, it's what we have become. It is an integral part of our life. I cannot imagine our lives minus you. And I say you because, see, you are Amway. Matt Rumps is here. Matt Rumps works for Amway Corporation. We were just up there a couple of weeks ago for the annual convention. But you are Amway as far as I'm concerned. It's your faces, your people, your families. You are part of our business. Even though you're not in our organization, it's you. And I can't imagine ever being apart from this business. The neat thing about this, we can do this until we just are too old to go anymore. When the motorhome won't crank, or we can't drive it, we'll get somebody to drive it for us. Right? We don't know. But the thing is, I'm so proud of this business. I'm so proud. After being up there in Ada a couple of weeks ago and listening to Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel as they stood and introduced the 8 children as the second generation, as the new corporate policy board of governors. And I told Rose, I said, it is so comforting to realize that we now see the next decade, the next several decades beginning to lay out with the same integrity, the same uprightness, the same honesty. And I want people in your community to look at you as the epitome of integrity, of effort, of reward. I want you to own the biggest homes in your community. I want you to be the biggest givers in your church. I want you to be the most vocal people in your community affairs. I want you to be the leaders in the communities and towns that you come from across this United States. Because, folks, people ask us all the time, how come Amway doesn't change their name? Couldn't you call it something else? You better hold your breath, baby, because we ain't changed the name to anything. We are going to make the name of Amway, you and I are going to make the name of Amway the #1 name in corporate America, private industry in this country and around the world, and it's going to start at weekends like this. So I salute you. I salute you. I really do. I am honored. Rose and I are honored to have been asked to be here to speak to you this weekend. I hope that in some small way we can set your path towards your future and towards the success that we want for you, so that one day you'll be like Angelo and Cindy and Rose and I, and you'll be propped up with Matt Rumser, propped up with our feet on the coffee table on the back deck of the Enterprise 4, cruising down through New England, talking about the future and what it's going to be and the people we wish were with us. We love you very much. We hope you have a dynamite year. God bless you.